The little girl's voice cracked in the cold air. "Mommy, please don't make me beg." Her tiny hands clutched the hem of her tattered dress, trembling, while the city, lights blurred through her tears. Cars roared past, their horns sharp and merciless, but nobody stopped. Her stepmother's nails dug into her thin arm as she shoved her toward the curb. "Hold out your hand. Cry if you must. The richer you make them feel, the more coins you'll bring." The girl's knees buckled, her lips quivering, when suddenly a sleek black car screeched to a halt. A tall figure stepped out, his suit cutting through the darkness like a blade. His voice thundered across the street. "Enough!" And that was the moment her world shifted. But let me pause here, because I know you're already hooked. You're probably wondering, who was this little girl? Why was she begging on the streets when she should have been playing with dolls or reading bedtime stories? And who was the man that shouted with such fury it froze even the cruelest heart? This isn't just another sad tale. It's a story about injustice so raw it could make your chest ache. It's about a child who had no choice but to carry the weight of cruelty, until destiny brought her face to face with a stranger, powerful enough to change everything. Now, before we go further, I want to talk directly to you. If you're watching this, I need you to do something simple yet powerful. Think of a time in your life when you saw something unfair. Maybe it was a child working when they should have been in school. Maybe it was someone in your own family being treated like they didn't matter. Did you speak up? Or did you look away, like so many people walking past her that night? Share it in the comments below. Because stories like this only matter if they spark something real inside us. And don't just watch quietly. Hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because today, you're not just an audience. You're part of a voice that refuses to stay silent when children cry out for mercy. All right, let's go back. Let's meet her before the tears, before the begging, before the night a millionaire's anger shattered her stepmother's cruelty. Her name was Clara, 7 years old, with eyes so wide and dark they seemed to drink in the whole world. She lived in a crumbling apartment on the edge of the city, where peeling paint curled from the walls and the pipes groaned louder than the neighbors arguing at midnight. Clara had once known warmth. Her real mother had been gentle, the kind of woman who hummed lullabies while cooking rice on the stove, who pressed kisses onto scraped knees, who whispered, "You are my sunshine," before sleep. But death doesn't care about sunshine. It took her mother when Clara was barely 5, and with her gone, the world quickly turned cold. Her father, a man who once laughed easily, grew quieter by the day. His grief was a stone he carried everywhere, dragging him down until he barely noticed the daughter at his side. He remarried within a year, perhaps desperate for companionship, or simply unable to raise a child alone. That decision would change everything. Because the woman he brought into their home didn't see Clara as a child. She saw her as a burden, a nuisance, a mouth that demanded food she didn't want to give. Her stepmother's name was Amelia. She was tall, sharp-faced, with a voice like vinegar poured over wounds. To outsiders, she smiled, wide, polished, convincing. But behind closed doors, her words cut deeper than knives. Clara learned quickly to stay quiet, to hide her drawings, to eat little, so Amelia wouldn't accuse her of stealing too much from the table. Even her father seemed blind, perhaps willfully so. When Amelia pressed a hand to his arm and cooed about how children are resilient, he nodded, grateful for her taking charge, never asking why Clara's eyes looked emptier each night. Clara had dreams, though. Dreams she didn't dare speak aloud. She wanted to be a teacher, like the kind woman at school who once told her, "You're bright, Clara. You can do great things." Those words stayed in her chest like a small flame, even when everything else turned to shadows. She would sit on the fire escape, hugging her knees, whispering lessons to the pigeons as if they were her students. Sometimes she'd draw letters on scraps of newspaper, pretending she was writing in a book of her own. She held on to hope, fragile as it was. But the neighborhood was unkind. It was the kind where children learned to look away from bruises, where neighbors heard shouting but shut their doors tighter. People noticed Clara's stepmother tugging her by the arm too harshly, or the way the girl's shoes flopped open with holes in the soles. But nobody said a word. Silence was easier, and silence, Clara would learn, was its own kind of cruelty. One night, Clara tried to ask her father, "Do you miss Mommy?" He stared at the floor, sighed, and whispered, "Go to bed, sweetheart." And in that moment, she realized he was slipping further away too. The only thing keeping her company was the dream that one day, someone, anyone, would see her. Clara's mornings always began the same way, with Amelia's voice slicing through the thin apartment walls like a knife. "Up, now. Don't make me come drag you out." Clara would scramble from her thin mattress on the floor, clutching the small blanket that smelled faintly of the mother she had lost. She never moved fast enough to please her stepmother. "Look at you, slow as a slug," Amelia sneered, tossing a pair of socks at her. They were mismatched and threadbare, the elastic long gone. Be grateful you even have those. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt toast. Her father sat at the table, shoulders hunched, sipping coffee that Amelia had poured. He rarely looked up when Clara entered. On the good days, he'd offer a tired smile. On the bad, he said nothing at all. Amelia would set 2 plates on the table, always 2, never 3. She ate alongside him while Clara stood in the corner waiting for the scraps. Some mornings, Amelia would slide a crust of bread toward her with a flick of disdain. Other mornings, she wouldn't bother. Clara's stomach growled, but she stayed silent. Complaints only earned her slaps. School was her escape. At school, she could blend in, pretend for a few hours that she was like the other children. But even there, Amelia's cruelty followed. Clara's shoes squeaked with water when it rained because the soles were split. Her uniform clung with the faint smell of mildew because Amelia refused to wash it more than once a month. Kids whispered. Some laughed. Clara kept her head down, pressing pencils so hard against her paper that the tips snapped. Still, there was her teacher, Miss Parker, who sometimes crouched by Clara's desk and whispered, "You have a beautiful mind. Don't let anyone dim it." Those words were a lifeline, but lifelines can only stretch so far. Amelia despised anything that gave Clara joy. One afternoon, Clara came home clutching a paper with a bright gold star. "I read the fastest in the whole class today," she said, beaming, holding it out for her father to see. He opened his mouth, pride flickering in his eyes, but Amelia snatched the paper first. She crumpled it into a ball and dropped it in the trash. "Reading doesn't put food on the table," she snapped. "Stop filling her head with nonsense." Clara's father looked down, lips pressed tight, and said nothing. Clara watched the gold star sink into coffee grounds, its shine smothered. The cruelty wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the quiet things. Amelia locking the cupboard where food was stored, so Clara could hear the click of the padlock every night while her stomach twisted in hunger. Sometimes it was making her scrub the bathroom floor with a rag until her knees bled. Once, Amelia sent her outside in the pouring rain to hang laundry that could have waited until morning. Clara's teeth chattered, her fingers numb, but Amelia stood at the window, arms folded, watching with satisfaction. And the neighbors saw. Old Mrs. Dwyer next door once opened her door to find Clara shivering in the hallway, arms wrapped around a stack of groceries too heavy for her frame. "Poor child," Mrs. Dwyer muttered under her breath. But then she shut the door. Nobody wanted trouble with Amelia. She was loud, sharp-tongued, and had a way of making anyone feel small with a single glance. People preferred to look away. Silence thickened around Clara like fog, suffocating, endless. One winter evening, Clara's father brought home a box of chocolates from work. Someone's gift he hadn't eaten. He placed it gently on the table. "Clara, here, take one." It was the first sweet thing she'd tasted in months. She reached out with trembling fingers, unwrapping the foil carefully, as if it were treasure. She barely tasted the chocolate before Amelia snatched the box away. "Don't spoil her," she scolded. "You'll turn her greedy." Then, in one deliberate move, she dropped the rest of the chocolates into the trash. The look on Clara's face, wide-eyed disbelief, her tiny jaw trembling, made even her father flinch. But again, he said nothing. Every injustice pressed heavier on Clara's small shoulders, but she carried them quietly. She had learned the cost of protest. The one time she had cried too loudly, Amelia had grabbed her by the wrist and hissed, "If you want to cry so badly, I'll give you a reason." Then came the sting of the belt, leaving red marks across her legs that Clara hid beneath her long socks at school. The marks faded. The fear didn't. Clara's heart clung to small rituals to survive. She whispered her mother's lullaby to herself when she lay down at night. She tucked away bits of colored paper or shiny bottle caps she found on the street, hiding them beneath her mattress like secret treasures. She counted the stars outside her window, making wishes no one would ever hear. One night, she whispered to the stars, "Please send someone who sees me." She was too young to know that sometimes wishes are heard. But before that someone arrived, her world grew darker. It began with the begging. Amelia had grown bitter about money. Bills piled up. Clara's father worked longer hours, leaving earlier, coming home later, his face etched with exhaustion. Amelia found her scapegoat easily. "Mouths eat, mouths cost," she muttered, glaring at Clara. One Saturday morning, she shoved an old tin cup into the child's hands. "You want to eat tonight? Then you'll earn it. Stand outside the market. Cry if you must. People give more when you cry." Clara's stomach lurched. "Mommy, please." "Don't call me Mommy," Amelia snapped, her eyes cold. "I'm not your mother. Your real mother left you with nothing. Now go." And so Clara's humiliation began. She stood by the busy street, her thin frame swallowed in a faded coat, holding out the cup with trembling hands. People rushed by, some tossing coins without looking, others muttering, "Where's her mother?" A few children her age pointed and giggled. Clara's cheeks burned. Each coin that clinked into her cup felt like a stone on her heart. She wanted to disappear into the pavement. When she returned home with a handful of coins, Amelia counted them, sneering. Pathetic. Do better tomorrow. Clara curled up on her mattress that night, pressing her hands against her ears to block out the sound of Amelia's laughter in the kitchen. But it didn't stop. It became routine. Every few days, Amelia shoved her out again, sometimes at the market, sometimes at the train station. Clara learned to drop her gaze, to let tears slide down without wiping them away. Tears made strangers pity her more. And still, Amelia called her useless. One rainy evening, Clara's body shook with cold as she stood outside the station. A boy from her school walked past with his mother. He stared at her, wide-eyed. His mother tugged his hand and hurried away, whispering something Clara couldn't hear. The next day at school, that boy mimicked her, holding out an imaginary cup, laughing with his friends. Clara wanted to sink into the floor. It was more than humiliation. It was erasure. Bit by bit, Amelia was stripping her of dignity, of childhood, of the belief that she mattered. And no one, not her father, not her neighbors, not her teachers, stepped in. Silence roared louder than the traffic. But fate has a way of twisting. On one night, when Clara whispered her wish again, the world finally answered. The nights grew longer, and with them, Clara's torment. Begging on the streets was no longer an occasional cruelty. It became her stepmother's favorite weapon. Amelia would dress herself in fine coats borrowed from her sister, brush on red lipstick, and stroll behind Clara at a distance, arms folded, eyes sharp. To passers-by, she looked like a concerned mother watching from afar. But her words, muttered through clenched teeth whenever Clara returned to her, cut like glass. Pathetic! Cry harder. Look hungrier. Who would give to a girl who looks as useless as you? One evening, a policeman stopped Clara. He knelt, voice gentle. Where are your parents, sweetheart? Clara opened her mouth, but the words tangled in fear. Amelia swept forward, her smile bright and false. Thank goodness you found her. She's a wanderer, this one. Always running off. The officer studied Clara's eyes, red, swollen, pleading. But Amelia's grip tightened on her shoulder. He hesitated, then nodded. Keep her close, ma'am. And just like that, he walked away. Clara's heart cracked. Even those who noticed chose the easy path. The cruelty at home sharpened. If Clara returned with too few coins, Amelia would yank her hair so hard it made her eyes water. Worthless. Can't even beg properly. She locked the fridge with a chain, feeding Clara only bread crusts or watered-down soup. On nights, she was especially cruel. She'd toss a plate onto the floor. Eat like the stray you are. Clara would crouch, scooping with her fingers while Amelia watched, sipping wine, her laughter echoing in the kitchen. And her father? He became a ghost. He walked in late, exhausted, shoulders sagging beneath invisible weights. He saw the tension in Clara's posture, the bruises she tried to hide, the hollow in her cheeks. But when he opened his mouth, Amelia's voice always cut in first. Don't you start. You think money grows on trees? I'm teaching her survival. His silence became a second betrayal, maybe worse than Amelia's cruelty. For silence, Clara realized could wound deeper than words. One day at school, Clara's teacher, Miss Parker, handed back an essay. "This was beautiful," she whispered, resting a gentle hand on Clara's shoulder. "You write like someone twice your age." Clara felt warmth bloom in her chest, but when she carried the paper home, Amelia snatched it before her father could see. She read the first line aloud in a mocking tone, then tore it down the middle. "You think writing feeds us? You think stories matter? Pathetic little girl." Clara's chest burned. She wanted to scream, but her voice remained trapped, strangled by fear. The final straw came on a freezing night in December. The air bit through her coat, the tin cup icy in her hand. Her shoes were soaked, her toes numb. Amelia had shoved her to the corner of the busiest street, warning, "Don't you dare come home empty." Clara's throat ached, but she forced her voice out anyway. "Please, help me. Please." The sound barely carried over the rush of cars. People glanced. Some dropped coins. Others turned away. One man muttered, "Where's her mother?" and walked faster. As the hours dragged, Clara's knees buckled. She slid to the curb, shivering. A group of teenagers passed, laughing, and one flicked a coin at her face. It clinked against her cheek before hitting the ground. They howled with laughter and disappeared into the night. Clara picked up the coin with trembling fingers, her cheeks hot with shame. Then it happened. A sleek black car slowed, its headlights cutting through the fog. The engine purred low, expensive. It rolled to a stop, a few feet away. Clara blinked through her tears as the driver's door swung open. A tall man stepped out, his presence commanding. He was dressed in a charcoal suit, his posture upright, his expression sharp as steel. His eyes locked on Clara, then shifted to Amelia, who hovered a few steps behind, arms folded, face stiffening. His voice cracked through the night like thunder. "Enough!" The word echoed, louder than the city noise, louder than the laughter still ringing in Clara's ears. People turned, heads swiveled. For the first time, someone had not just noticed, someone had stopped. Clara froze, her cup slipping from her hands, coins scattering on the pavement. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't know who this man was. All she knew was that for the first time in forever, someone was angry for her. And Amelia's smile, the one she wielded like armor, finally faltered. The winter air seemed to freeze in place. Clara's small body trembled on the curb. Her thin fingers clenched around nothing now that the cup had slipped away. The scattered coins glimmered weakly under the streetlight, like fallen stars no one cared to pick up. Amelia's breath clouded in the night air as she straightened her coat and forced a smile, the kind that could fool anyone who didn't look too closely. But the man who had just stepped out of the car wasn't anyone. He was David Mercer, a name whispered with awe in business circles. A millionaire whose real estate empire stretched across the city. To the world, he was known for his ruthless deals, his ability to walk into any room and command it. Tonight, though, he wasn't here for business. He was simply driving home after a long day, his tie loosened, his thoughts heavy. Until he saw her, until he saw Clara. "Enough," he repeated, his voice low, but carrying across the street with authority that made even strangers pause mid-step. He moved closer, his polished shoes crunching over the frost. His gaze dropped to the child on the curb, hair matted from rain, cheeks hollow, eyes far too old for her small face. Something inside him tightened. Memories he kept buried stirred, his own daughter's laughter, a voice he hadn't heard in years, a loss that still ached. He swallowed hard. Amelia stepped forward quickly, her voice sugary sweet. "Oh, sir, thank you for your concern." "She's just a stubborn child. She wanders off, plays these little games. I've told her not to sit out here." "Games?" David's eyes sharpened, cutting through her lie. He crouched beside Clara, lowering himself to her level. His coat brushed the pavement, but he didn't care. "Tell me, sweetheart, did someone tell you to sit here? To beg?" Clara's lips parted, but no sound came. Her throat was tight, her body stiff. She glanced at Amelia, whose smile had vanished, her eyes blazing with silent warning. Clara's breath hitched. She shook her head quickly, tears pooling again. David's jaw clenched. He recognized fear when he saw it. He had seen it in boardrooms, in employees too afraid to speak against cruelty, and once, long ago, in the mirror of his own home. He straightened slowly, his presence towering over Amelia now. "This child doesn't look like she's playing games," he said, his tone calm but edged with steel. "She looks hungry, cold, terrified." A few bystanders had gathered now, their curiosity piqued. Whispers rippled through the small crowd. Amelia's face flushed. She reached for Clara's arm. "Come, dear, we're going home." "Thank you, sir, but you've misunderstood." David stepped forward, blocking her path. His shadow stretched across Amelia like a dark shield. "I don't think I misunderstood at all." His eyes flicked to Clara again. "When was the last time you ate, little one?" Clara's lips trembled. A single word slipped out, barely a whisper. "Yesterday?" The crowd gasped. Amelia snapped, "She's lying. She does this all the time, making up stories for attention. You know how children are." David didn't blink. Children don't invent hunger that carves their faces thin. They don't invent bruises you've tried to hide beneath sleeves. His voice was louder now, echoing against the stone buildings. Even cars slowed, drivers rolling down windows to catch the commotion. Clara stared at him, her small chest heaving. For the first time, someone was saying the words she had prayed to hear. Someone saw her. Amelia's mask cracked. Her smile collapsed into a scowl. "Who do you think you are? Meddling in other people's lives? She's mine to deal with. My husband trusts me with her. We don't need charity, and we certainly don't need your judgment." David's eyes narrowed, his tone cold as winter air. "I don't see a mother here. I see a coward using a child as a wallet." He took a step closer, his presence pressing down until Amelia faltered, actually stepping back. "And I won't stand by and watch another life get destroyed." The crowd murmured louder now. A woman whispered, "She made that little girl beg? Unbelievable." A man shook his head. "Monstrous." Phones were raised, recording. Amelia's composure slipped further with every second. Clara clutched her knees, heart racing. She didn't know what this man would do, but she knew, deep in her small chest, that something had shifted. The air no longer felt like hers to bear alone. David looked down at her again, softening. His voice dropped. "Just for her. You don't have to cry anymore." And in that moment, Clara's tears fell differently. Not from fear, from the fragile spark of hope. But hope, like a flame, is delicate, and Amelia wasn't about to let hers burn. She yanked Clara up by the arm, pulling her back hard enough to make her stumble. "We're leaving." Now David's hand shot out, gripping Amelia's wrist with controlled force. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. His eyes burned into hers. Not until the truth comes out. The tension crackled, thicker than the frost-laden air. Amelia's lips curled, ready to spit venom. Clara's heart pounded so loud she thought the whole world could hear it. The crowd leaned in, and then sirens wailed in the distance. The wail of sirens cut through the night, bouncing off the stone walls like a promise and a threat. Amelia's grip on Clara tightened until her knuckles whitened, but David did not let go of her wrist. His face was unreadable, controlled fury simmering beneath a calm exterior. When the police car rolled to a stop, 2 officers stepped out. They scanned the scene. A trembling child, a furious woman, and a man whose presence alone commanded authority. The crowd that had gathered began to murmur louder, voices overlapping. Some pointed, some recorded, some whispered details that twisted with every retelling. The officer in charge raised an eyebrow. "What's going on here?" Amelia's voice shot out first, shrill and trembling, the mask of innocence already slipping. "Officer, thank goodness you're here." "This man, he's harassing me. My daughter and I were just heading home, and he grabbed me." The crowd booed softly, mutters of "liar" rising. Someone shouted, "She makes that girl beg for money." David didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady on the officer. "This child has been forced to beg on the streets. She's malnourished, terrified. I couldn't just drive past." The officer's eyes shifted to Clara. She hugged herself tightly, shivering, her wide eyes darting between Amelia and David. "Sweetheart," the officer said gently, "is that true? Did someone make you sit here?" Clara opened her mouth. No sound came. Her throat closed around the truth, fear clamping down harder than chains. Amelia's glare bored into her, sharp and threatening. Clara whimpered and shook her head. "There, you see?" Amelia snapped, her smile twisted. "She's just dramatic. Children do these things. She loves attention." David's jaw tightened. He crouched, softening his tone for Clara. "Look at me," he said, his voice quiet, steady. Her eyes lifted slowly, tears trembling at the corners. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. Not with me here. If you tell the truth, I promise, I'll protect you." His words struck something inside her, like a hand reaching into the dark to pull her out. For the first time, Clara felt a flicker of safety. Her lips trembled. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, She told me to beg." The air seemed to still. The officer's eyes hardened. The crowd erupted in whispers. Amelia's face went pale before twisting into rage. "She's lying. You little brat. Enough." The officer cut her off sharply. He motioned to his partner. "Take the child aside." Clara was gently led to the back of the patrol car, wrapped in a warm blanket one of the officers had in the trunk. David stayed close, watching her small frame shake. She clutched the blanket like it was a lifeline, her eyes darting constantly, still afraid Amelia might appear beside her. Amelia screamed, her voice echoing in the night. "She's my stepdaughter. You can't take her from me. My husband will hear of this. You'll regret it." But her words fell flat against the officer's authority. She was ushered back, hands trembling with fury. For the first time, Clara was out of her reach. But freedom doesn't heal overnight. At the station, Clara sat quietly in a small interview room, her legs swinging above the chair. A kind social worker named Grace crouched beside her, offering a cup of hot chocolate. "You're safe now, sweetheart. Nobody here will hurt you." Clara's hands wrapped around the cup, but she didn't drink. She stared at the steam as if it might disappear any second, just like everything else good in her life. She wanted to believe Grace, but the echo of Amelia's threats lingered in her ears. "Tell anyone, and you'll regret it." David watched from across the room, his heart heavy. He hadn't planned to be here, yet leaving felt impossible. Something about the girl reminded him too much of what he'd lost. He had once held a daughter, this small, soothed tears from cheeks this soft. The memory cut deep, but looking at Clara, he felt something else too, something that pulled him to stay. The process was messy. Reports had to be filed. Amelia's fury spilled out in every direction. Calls to her husband, threats of lawsuits, shouting matches with officers. Clara's father finally arrived, his face pale and tired. When he saw Clara wrapped in the blanket, he froze. His lips parted, guilt flashing across his face. Clara. Clara's heart leapt, but not with joy. She wanted him to scoop her up, to say the words she had waited years to hear. "I see you. I'm sorry. I'll protect you." Instead, his eyes shifted nervously toward Amelia, who was already spewing venom at the officers. "She's overreacting," Amelia snapped. "This is all a mistake." "My husband knows how difficult this child can be." Her father's shoulders sagged. He said nothing. Clara lowered her gaze, her tiny hands tightening around the cup. The betrayal stung sharper than the cold. In the days that followed, Clara was placed temporarily in a children's shelter. It wasn't much. A plain room with 2 beds, white sheets, and walls painted in cheerful colors that didn't quite erase the loneliness. She watched other children play with donated toys, their laughter filling the halls. But she stayed in her corner, knees tucked, eyes wide and uncertain. At night, she whispered her mother's lullaby to herself. But even that comfort felt thinner now, stretched by fear. She wondered if Amelia would come for her, if her father would let her be dragged back. Every sound in the hallway made her jump. David visited. The first time he walked into the shelter, the children stared. This tall man in a tailored suit, carrying bags of books, clothes, and toys. But his eyes sought only one child. Clara sat at a table, coloring quietly with a broken crayon. When she saw him, her crayon froze mid-line. He crouched beside her, just as he had on the street. "Hey," he said softly. "How are you holding up?" Clara shrugged. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to him. "I brought you something," he said, pulling a small, leather-bound notebook from the bag. "So you can write your own stories, or draw, whatever you like." Her small fingers hesitated before taking it. She traced the cover with reverence, like it was treasure. "For me?" she whispered. "For you," David said, and for the first time, the corners of her mouth lifted, just slightly. But struggles rarely end with one act of kindness. Amelia fought back viciously. She twisted the story to anyone who would listen. Neighbors, relatives, even Clara's father. They're trying to take her from us because we're not rich, she spat. They don't understand discipline. She painted herself as the victim, convincing enough people that doubt spread like wildfire. Clara overheard fragments during supervised visits. Amelia's voice dripped with poison. You'll come back home soon. Mark my words. No stranger can keep you. Clara trembled every time, her body curling tighter against the corner of the visitation room. Even David had doubts. One evening, he sat in his office, papers stacked high, his lawyer on the phone. You're getting involved in something messy, the lawyer warned. Custody battles, abuse cases, they're complicated. Are you sure you want to tie yourself to this? David looked out the window at the city skyline, lights glowing like stars. He thought of Clara's wide eyes, the way her voice cracked when she whispered, yesterday. He closed his eyes, inhaled slowly, and said, I can't walk away. Clara's struggles weren't only external. They burned inside too. She wanted to believe she was safe, but years of cruelty don't vanish in a week. At night, she dreamed of Amelia's voice, woke up sweating, heart pounding. During the day, she hesitated to speak, afraid her words might spark anger. Even with Grace, the social worker, she kept her sentences short. But there were small victories. When David visited, she dared to show him a drawing from her notebook, a picture of a little girl holding a star. That's me, she said shyly, and that's hope. David's chest tightened. He nodded, his voice thick. It's beautiful. Still, setbacks followed. One morning, Clara's father arrived at the shelter. His eyes were red, his hands trembling. Clara, sweetheart, I want you to come home, he whispered. Clara's heart ached. She wanted her father. She wanted the man who once tucked her in. But she also remembered the silence, the way he let Amelia's cruelty bloom unchecked. Tears blurred her vision. Will she be there? She asked. He looked away. The silence was answer enough. Clara turned her face from him, sobbing quietly. The war between hope and fear raged on inside her, every day, every night. But the battle was far from over. Amelia wasn't done fighting. David wasn't done protecting. And Clara wasn't done learning how to trust again. The road ahead would twist with court hearings, threats, and doubts. But the faint flame of hope had been lit. And this time, Clara wasn't alone. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnished wood and paper, sterile, official, suffocating. Clara sat at the long table beside Grace, her tiny legs swinging just above the floor. Her notebook lay closed in front of her, her fingers tracing the edge again and again like a ritual. Across the room, Amelia sat upright, dressed in a sharp navy dress, pearls at her throat. She wore the smile she always reserved for outsiders, the one that made her look like a respectable, caring woman. David sat on the opposite side, his posture straight, his eyes locked on Amelia with an intensity that made her shift ever so slightly in her chair. He hadn't come here to posture or to intimidate. He had come here to fight for a child's right to breathe freely. The judge cleared his throat, flipping through the case file. We are here today to hear testimony regarding the welfare of minor child Clara Hayes. Allegations of neglect and forced child labor have been raised. His eyes flicked up, cool and steady. Mrs. Amelia Hayes, You may speak, Amelia rose gracefully, her voice smooth. Your Honor, I am a stepmother, doing my best in a difficult situation. Clara is imaginative. She tells stories. I have done everything possible to give her structure and discipline. My husband works long hours, and without me, that child would have no stability. She paused, placing a hand over her chest dramatically. I love her as my own. Clara's stomach twisted. She wanted to scream, but her voice felt trapped under Amelia's shadow. The judge nodded slightly, then turned. Mr. Mercer, you claim otherwise. David rose slowly. His voice was steady, measured, but every syllable carried weight. Your Honor, I don't need to claim. I saw it. I saw a child shivering in the cold, forced to beg while this woman stood back and watched. I saw hunger in her eyes, fear in her silence, and I heard the truth from Clara herself. He turned, meeting the judge's gaze head on. This isn't discipline. This is cruelty, and it cannot continue. Amelia's smile faltered, but she leaned forward, her tone biting. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know her. She's not your child. This is none of your concern. David's eyes sharpened. It became my concern the moment you pushed her onto the streets like she was less than human. Children don't belong on sidewalks with tin cups. They belong in classrooms, in homes that keep them safe. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Amelia's jaw tightened, her mask slipping further. She snapped, You think you can buy her happiness? That's all men like you do. Throw money around and expect people to worship you. David's voice dropped lower, harder. Money didn't stop my daughter from dying. Don't talk to me about buying happiness. A silence fell, heavy and sharp. Clara's eyes widened. She didn't know what he meant, but the pain in his voice was unmistakable. Amelia shifted, caught off guard, before regaining her sneer. That's your tragedy, not mine. Don't project your failures onto me. The judge raised a hand. Enough. I will hear from the child. Clara's breath caught. Grace touched her shoulder gently. You don't have to be afraid, she whispered. Clara's legs trembled as she stood, the room suddenly enormous. She clutched her notebook like armor. Her voice was small, shaky. She made me beg. She told me I couldn't eat unless I brought money. Her throat tightened. She looked at Amelia, whose eyes blazed with unspoken threats. Clara froze. David leaned forward, his voice softer than ever. Clara, look at me. Her eyes darted to him. He gave a small nod, his gaze steady, unshakable. Tell the truth. I'm right here. Her lips trembled, and then, like a dam breaking, the words spilled out. She hit me. She locked the food away. She threw away my school papers. She laughed when I cried. She said nobody would believe me. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Amelia's face went red, her composure shattering. Lies. All lies. She's manipulating you. Sit down, Mrs. Hayes, the judge said firmly. Tears streaked Clara's cheeks, but she kept going, her small fists clenching around the notebook. I just wanted her to love me. But she never did. The silence that followed was deafening. The judge's eyes softened for the briefest second before hardening again. He scribbled something in his notes. I have heard enough for today. A decision will be delivered shortly. Amelia collapsed back into her seat, fury radiating off her. David remained standing a moment longer, his chest rising and falling with controlled breath. Then he sat, his gaze still locked protectively on Clara. When the gavel struck, the room buzzed with motion. Amelia leaned across the table, her whisper venomous as a snake. You think you've won? You've ruined everything. She'll pay for this. David's hand landed firmly on the table between them, his voice low but deadly calm. Not anymore. Clara stared at him, her heart pounding. For the first time in her life, someone had spoken for her, loudly, firmly, without fear. And though the fight wasn't over, something inside her began to uncoil. A seed of belief, a fragile trust. The confrontation had been brutal, but for the first time, Amelia's grip had cracked. And through that crack, light had begun to pour. The days following the hearing stretched like threads pulled too tight. Clara stayed at the shelter, waiting, her notebook filling with drawings and small, hesitant words. Each time the door opened, her heart leapt, afraid it might be Amelia come to drag her back. Then, one gray morning, the judgment came. The courthouse buzzed with tension as the decision was read. Effective immediately, the judge announced, voice firm. Custody of minor child Clara Hayes is removed from Amelia Hayes. Due to evidence of neglect and abuse, Amelia Hayes is hereby prohibited from unsupervised contact. Temporary guardianship is granted to Mr. David Mercer, pending further review. The word struck like a thunderclap. Amelia shot to her feet, her face twisted with rage. This is ridiculous! She's mine! You can't take her away! Her voice cracked, desperation seeping through the cracks in her fury. You'll regret this, all of you. The bailiff moved closer. Sit down, ma'am. Amelia's eyes darted to Clara, blazing with venom. But for the first time, Clara didn't shrink. She pressed her notebook to her chest and looked away, her small chin lifting just enough to show defiance. David stood slowly, every movement calm, deliberate. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply looked at Amelia and said, You don't get to hurt her anymore. The judge's gavel struck. Final, absolute. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Questions rang out. Mr. Mercer, why step in? What happens to the child now? Amelia, do you deny the accusations? David shielded Clara with his arm, guiding her through the crowd. The flashbulbs frightened her. She clung to his coat, her small hand gripping tightly. He bent down, his voice low. Don't look at them. Just look at me. You're safe. She did. For the first time in years, she let herself believe it. Amelia was escorted away, her voice screeching in protest, her threats scattering into the cold air. Neighbors would talk, strangers would whisper, but none of it mattered now. Her power had crumbled in the face of truth. That night, David drove Clara to his home for the first time. The mansion loomed tall and bright, a stark contrast to the crumbling apartment she had known. But it wasn't the size that made her gasp. It was the warmth. Lights glowed softly in every window. A fire crackled in the hearth. The scent of real food drifted from the kitchen. She stepped inside slowly, clutching her notebook. Her eyes darted everywhere. Polished floors, shelves of books, framed photographs of smiling faces. It felt like another world. David knelt beside her. This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be. Her eyes welled up. But what if she comes back? His voice was steady, unwavering. She won't. I promise you that. She'll never hurt you again. The promise wasn't just words, it was an anchor. Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years: safety. He guided her to the dining table where a meal waited: steaming bowls of soup, fresh bread, fruit gleaming in a silver bowl. Clara hesitated, her fingers twitching. Amelia's voice echoed in her mind. Don't touch that. Don't take too much. Don't be greedy. David noticed. He pulled out the chair gently. This is yours, Clara. You don't need permission to eat in this house. Slowly, she sat. She lifted a spoonful of soup, her hands trembling. The warmth spread through her chest like sunlight. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks as she ate, bite after bite, afraid it might vanish if she stopped. David said nothing. He simply sat across from her, watching, his own throat tight. When she was done, she whispered, "Thank you." His eyes softened. You never need to thank me for being treated like you deserve. The justice wasn't only in the court's ruling. It was in the small, ordinary moments that followed. Clara slept in a bed with soft sheets that smelled of lavender, not mildew. She bathed without someone banging on the door, shouting that she was wasting water. She walked into a kitchen where food was never locked away, and slowly she began to smile. Tentative at first, then brighter, freer. David saw his daughter's ghost in her sometimes. The way she tilted her head when she was curious. The way her laughter bubbled up unexpectedly. It hurt, but it healed too. Protecting Clara gave his grief a purpose. One evening, Clara handed him her notebook. On the last page, she had drawn two figures: a little girl holding hands with a tall man. Above them, a word in shaky letters: family. David's eyes stung. He pulled her close, his voice rough. Yes, Clara? Family. And in that moment, the justice was complete. Spring arrived slowly that year, but to Clara, it felt like stepping into an entirely new world. The city no longer looked gray and menacing. It glowed with blossoms on street corners, fresh breezes carrying scents of growth. For the first time in her memory, she noticed beauty instead of fear. David enrolled her in a new school. On her first day, she clutched his hand tightly as they walked through the gates. Her notebook was tucked safely into her backpack, along with brand new pencils and books. Children's laughter echoed across the playground, and for once, she wasn't standing outside of it. Will they laugh at me? She whispered. David crouched to meet her eyes. They'll see you for who you are, and you, Clara, are remarkable. Don't ever forget that his words wrapped around her like armor. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. At first, it wasn't easy. Years of silence clung to her. She flinched when voices rose too suddenly, hesitated before raising her hand in class. But slowly, with the kindness of her teacher and the quiet encouragement of her new classmates, she began to speak more, smile more, laugh without fear that it would be punished. Evenings in David's home were quiet, warm, filled with the rhythm of normalcy she had once thought impossible. He worked in his office while she curled on the couch with her books. Sometimes they cooked together, messy attempts that left flour on her cheeks and laughter echoing through the kitchen. Sometimes he told her stories of his childhood, and in return, she read aloud from her notebook, her voice growing stronger with each page. But the real healing showed in small things. The way she stopped hoarding food under her bed. The way she no longer jumped at the sound of footsteps in the hall. The way she sang softly to herself while coloring, her voice light, unafraid. One evening, she padded into David's study, notebook in hand. "Can I read you something I wrote?" she asked, her eyes bright but uncertain. "Of course," he said, setting his papers aside. She opened the notebook, flipping to a page filled with neat handwriting. "It's a story," she explained, "about a little girl who thought she was invisible. But one day, someone saw her, and everything changed. Her voice trembled at first, but soon it steadied, flowing like a melody." David listened, every word striking deep. When she finished, she looked up, searching his face nervously. "That," he said quietly, "is the most powerful story I have ever heard." Her smile lit the room brighter than any lamp. The bond between them grew unshakable. For Clara, David became more than a guardian. He became the safe harbor she had always prayed for. For David, she became the second chance he never thought he'd receive, a way to transform his grief into love again. The city still bustled outside. Strangers still rushed past children with empty hands, but in one home, hope had been restored. Clara no longer whispered her wishes to the stars at night. She didn't need to. She had someone listening right beside her. And that, my friends, is Clara's story. A story that began with a child's whispered plea on a cold street corner and ended with the warmth of safety, family, and hope. But as much as this feels like a story, we both know it's more than that. Children like Clara exist in every city, in every neighborhood. Some are forced to beg. Some are silenced by cruelty behind closed doors. And too often, people walk past, heads down, pretending not to see. Here's the truth. Injustice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hides in silence, in neighbors who don't speak, in fathers who look away, in the moments when it's easier to ignore than to intervene. But change begins when even one person says, "Enough." That's what David did. He wasn't Clara's father. He wasn't her teacher. He wasn't obligated. But he chose to see her when others didn't. And that choice changed everything. So let me ask you, how many times have you seen something unfair and stayed silent? How many times have you told yourself, "It's not my business"? I want you to sit with that, because maybe one day your voice could be the difference between despair and hope for someone like Clara. If this story stirred something in you, I want to hear it. Drop a comment below. Share a moment when you witnessed injustice or when someone stood up for you. Your words might remind another viewer that they're not alone. And if you believe stories like Clara's need to be heard, then don't let this video end here. Hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more stories that shine a light on the struggles too many try to hide. Every click, every share, every comment, it's not just support for this channel. It's a way of saying, we refuse to look away. Remember, kindness is never wasted. And sometimes, being the one to say enough can save a life.